today's video, I am going to be talking about what it really feels like to be all but dissertation. So if you are new to academia or perhaps unfamiliar with what it means to be all but dissertation, it essentially means that I have completed all of the requirements from my program in order to finish my PhD other than completing my dissertation. So as a really quick oversimplified summary of what the dissertation is, it's essentially my final project in my PhD. However, this final project is incredibly important. So I thought that today I would share a little bit about what my experience has been thus far, and specifically what are some things that I didn't necessarily expect or anticipate about this time in the PhD journey. Okay, so let's just hop right into it. So the first thing that I didn't necessarily anticipate about reaching this point where I'm all but dissertation is just how much I would change from the time I started my PhD until now, and more specifically, what those changes would mean for me. So there's a lot of different things that I could go into here, but essentially the way that I am envisioning my future now is different than the way that I envisioned it when I first started. So when I first started my program, I was very passionate about remaining in academia. I wanted to become a professor. I was not at all interested in industry. The reason that I was pursuing a PhD is because I absolutely loved the academic setting, and it's where I wanted to stay and build my career throughout the rest of my life. Now that I'm all but dissertation, things have changed a little bit for me. And it's not just how I envision my professional future, but it's also how I envision my personal future. So when I first started, how old was I? I want to say that maybe I was around 23 or 24. I started in 2019. So yeah, I think I was around 24 years old. And at that time, I wasn't really thinking yet about wanting to have a family or wanting to see my nieces and nephews grow up, or that where I would live and raise my kids was actually a really important part of sort of taking control of my life. These just weren't things that were necessarily on my radar then. And now, like I said, I'm turning 28 this week, at this point, they sort of are. And it's not something that I necessarily could have anticipated or planned for, because to me, it feels like something that has sort of happened overnight. Now, naturally, that's not the case. I'm sure that there have been many little moments that have led into the way that I'm feeling and the way that I'm envisioning my future. But when it comes to sort of weighing these personal goals along with my professional goals, it does change the way that I envision my next steps after I complete my degree. Additionally, I am also more open to some of the career opportunities that might exist for me after I'm done. So, like I mentioned before, I sort of only saw myself in academia. And now, given my personal goals, as well as some of the things that have taken place in the world during the time that I just so happened to be getting my PhD, I am feeling differently about where I could potentially see myself when it comes to my professional future. So, if I had to give any advice to someone who is just beginning their PhD journey, it would just be to try and remain open. I think that when we are closed off to the different options or opportunities that lie ahead, we may just not see them. And I think that while it's important to stay goal oriented and sort of know what you want and to align your goals and your daily habits with achieving those goals, at the same time, when we are open about the possibilities that might lie ahead for us, it could allow us to engage in different networking opportunities that could be beneficial for us at some point. So, if you are someone who perhaps is interviewing for programs right now or trying to decide what program is right for you, one thing that I would look out for that I didn't necessarily consider is to just look for those cues about that environment within the program that you're considering. Does it seem as though some of the peers or faculty there are perhaps knowledgeable or at least open to the various opportunities that exist for individuals who are getting PhDs now? This is a unique time to earn a PhD because there are many more career options available to us as compared to what was available 10, 20, or 30 years ago. It might not be something that you're even considering at the beginning of your journey, but it could be useful to you later on down the road. The next thing that I never could have anticipated about this time being all but dissertation is how tired I would be. There are many achievements or milestones that have led to reaching this point in this process. So, for instance, I started off by having to complete a first year project. I also had to pass a 2 semester stats sequence. So that filled the place of what are typically known as qualification exams in programs. So while we don't have quals, we did have to pass that stats sequence. From there, I had to propose, run, and defend my master's. After that, I had to complete my third year conceptual review paper as well as my fourth year presentation, and I submitted that for publication. And along the way, I also had to complete all of my required coursework. So there were various milestones, like I mentioned, that led to this point. I never could have anticipated that after completing all those milestones, I would feel myself starting to slow down and I would feel my motivations changing a little bit. So, what's unique about being all but dissertation is that you do have all of those achievements under your belt, and you can sort of start to see the horizon, you can start to see the finish line. And so, in one sense, you're feeling excited, hopeful, and ready to move past this phase in your academic and professional journey and sort of get your life started essentially. But then, in another sense, you're tired and perhaps a bit worn down from having gone through all of those hurdles. Anytime you see that someone has successfully published any sort of paper in the literature, just know that there was anguish that was associated with that along the way. I never could have anticipated that I would notice myself slowing down in this way and that it would be really challenging to sort of keep up my stamina because this is definitely a marathon. It is in no way a race. It's hard to be in one place for this long. So, in my program, it typically takes someone around 5 or 6 years on average to finish, although some people do take longer. And it's just a long time to be in one place, not only geographically, but working with the same people, studying the same research topics, working toward one singular goal. And again, even though there are those sort of little achievements along the way, many of which aren't really that little at all, but even though there are these achievements along the way, you still are just focused on that sort of end goal of completing your degree. And so this semester, as I've noticed myself moving past that final requirement of the fourth year presentation, having my paper published, I've realized that I have to have a little bit of compassion and patience with myself and sort of be gentle at this phase in the journey, even though it's not what I expected necessarily, just kind of accepting and sitting with the fact that I do feel slower, I do feel a little bit less motivated, and that's okay. And I can still find ways to be disciplined with myself and grasp little glimmers of inspiration as they come so that I can finish up. And then the last thing that I couldn't have necessarily anticipated about this phase is that developing the dissertation would not be intuitive. So, like I mentioned before, there were sort of many milestones that I had to complete to this point, and I have kind of built on my research interests and questions along the way. When it came to developing my ideas, honing in on the specific questions I wanted to ask and the methods that I would use to ask those questions, I thought that it would go rather smoothly and, like I said, be somewhat intuitive. And to this point, that hasn't necessarily been the case. So I think that no matter what, the dissertation is a huge thing, right? It's challenging. I think if you are in the process of developing your dissertation and you are coming across maybe more hurdles or challenges than you could have anticipated, I definitely sympathize with you, and please just know that you are not alone in that experience. I understand that some points of this discussion may have come across a little bit more negative. I hope that isn't the case, but I understand if it has felt that way. And I'll just say that I think it's important to kind of use this platform to open up some of these discussions because, as I've mentioned before here as well as over on my Instagram, I think that this experience can be uniquely isolating. I think that we can hesitate to have these discussions with individuals outside of perhaps our cohort or peer group. And yet, I think that if we were able to have these open discussions more often, not only, again, would it remind us that we aren't alone in our struggles and hopefully help to motivate and encourage us, as well as remove any sort of unnecessary shame that I think naturally many of us do experience. I think it also could be helpful for those of you who are preparing to enter into a program. I think that if I had come into this situation with perhaps a more realistic understanding of kind of the array of challenges that could arise, then perhaps I wouldn't have been so surprised or felt ashamed in any way when they did happen. I hope that by opening up these discussions, we can connect with one another through our struggles and hopefully help one another along the way. If you're in a similar phase, I would love to know kind of how you are feeling about being all but dissertation. Do your experiences seem similar to mine, or has it been different for you? Please comment down below and let us know. Thank you all for being here. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please let me know by liking and leaving a comment below. If you have not already, please subscribe. I would love for you to become a member of this community. Thanks again. I keep feeling like there's something on my nose.